The scripture from today comes from Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is a place they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Again, this text comes from Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8.
Today, I want to talk on the topic, the story continues. The story continues. Years ago, when I was leading God's Self and Neighbor Ministries, I was asked the question, "Rev, when are you going to stop using the Bible as the text for your sermons?" I thought that was a very odd question to ask someone who was raised in the church and spent 6 years studying Christian religion and biblical texts. But I get it. The biblical text has been translated multiple times. It's been used to hurt as much as it's been used to heal. It has stories of hope and it has stories of horror. And how many times can you read and tell the same old stories? I have asked myself those same questions at times, especially when I try to approach the text to glean a contemporary message out of these ancient thoughts. This week was no different. With this being Easter and with GSN community having a Christian, albeit progressive and inclusive foundation, I have to say something about the resurrection of Jesus. But I've already preached from all of these crucifixion and resurrection texts. What am I going to say? So I committed myself to preach whatever was listed and predetermined by the common lectionary. And for this Easter, that text is out of Mark. I've preached from this many times, usually focused on the determination of the women making their way to Jesus's tomb to anoint the body, even though they had no idea how the stone at the entrance of the tomb would be rolled away. But this time, there was a new thought revealed as I read that whole passage. And that's the magic of the Bible. There's so many stories that when we read it, if we have a desire to find a new message, it's usually revealed. This is not confined to just the biblical text. It's even true about the stories we tell and about our own lives. Sometimes we can tell or think the same story about the events of our past. We can tell it over and over again. We can think it over and over again, but sometimes those stories include hurt, anger, or fear. But, we can go back and look at the stories with new lenses. We can go back and look at those stories of our life with lenses of grace and determination or wholeness, and we'll get a whole new revelation. For example, we may have a coworker or a manager or even a loved one that we had labeled as mean or evil. But when we look again with the mind of love and grace, we may come to realize that that person wasn't evil, that person was hurting, or that person was fearful. Very often, there's more to the story. And the same is true of this text for today. The text comes out of the Gospel of Mark, which is considered by most scholars to be the first gospel that was written. The author used as sources oral accounts of the life of Jesus and a document referred to as Q, which includes sayings of Jesus. The audience for Mark's gospel was Christians living in Rome in the first century. They were mostly lower class immigrants, Jew and Gentile, and they were organized into several diverse house church communities. Some of these Christians in Rome were undergoing persecution because they were being used as scapegoats for a great fire that occurred during Nero's reign. It was to this community that the author of Mark was writing this gospel to try to share good news of Jesus Christ. He tells the story about the time after Jesus was crucified, or I should say executed. It says, after the Sabbath had passed, which would have been after 6 p.m. on Saturday, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they may anoint the body of Jesus. And then early in the morning of the first day of the week, which would have been Sunday, they went to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus. But as we know, when they got there, instead of finding the body of Jesus, a young man in a long white robe who was thought to be an angel greeted them and showed them that Jesus was not there. You know, over the years, people have interpreted that in various ways. Some people say Jesus got up and then took a tour through hell before ascending to heaven. Some people take the text literally and look for evidence to the story to see if the story is true. Like, you may remember the excitement that arose years ago when people found the Shroud of Turin, which was believed to bear an image of a crucified man, and they thought that that man was Jesus. People put a lot of energy arguing, was Jesus's resurrection physical or was it spiritual? We're not going to argue that point today. But today I want to stick with what the text says. And it says Jesus was not there. But there was a message for the women. It was, but go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. Now I have to ask, what would your message be if you were Jesus? What would you leave behind to share with these people? What if you were able to be resurrected from the dead? Would you care about the people who weren't there for you? Fearful disciples who had gone along for the ride when Jesus was a rock star, but abandoned him when the perks ran out and life got hard. Or Peter, who promised to be there when the stuff hit the fan. But when it actually hit the fan, he said, I don't even know him, never heard the name Jesus, I don't know him. And during the most grueling time of his life, when Jesus was going through the horrific process of execution, his boys, his disciples, were nowhere around. Can you imagine the hurt and the pain that would have caused? What's our response when people abandon us or do us wrong? How long do you both have to pay? I put it that way because very often both parties miss the connection, miss the love that was shared. But somebody has to be willing to make the first move. I read a quote, it's an unknown person, but the quote said, love those who hurt you the most because they are probably the ones closest to you. They too are on a path, and just like you, they are learning to walk before they can fly. Imagine if everybody who hurt you in life turned their backs on you. You would be playing a hell of a lot of solitaire. Love them no matter what. Jesus showed that kind of love when he had the grace to still want to meet up with Peter and the other disciples. We can learn something about that kind of grace in our personal lives, in our relationships, but we really need to know that kind of grace when it comes to our public life. I need Jesus to show me how to love the defense attorneys who are working to defend a murderous police officer while trying to turn a trial into the prosecution of George Floyd. I need Jesus to show me how to love those manifestations of Jim Crow in new suits that pass laws that make voting difficult for folks in Georgia, making it even a misdemeanor to give food or water to persons standing in line at the polls. I need Jesus to teach me how to love that level of evil. I need Jesus to show me how to love the people who carelessly spread COVID while our friends and family members are still getting sick and dying? I need Jesus to show me. I think the answer is we have to just believe in the power of love over hate. Even when hate is in our face or blocking our path, we must believe that our working and our standing for justice will benefit even those who work against us. We just need to operate from a place of love, no matter what. Jesus embodied enough love and grace that the message to the disciples was, I'll meet you again in Galilee. And that was also good news to the people for whom Mark wrote this gospel. No matter what was happening, persecution, poverty, disagreements, this story of Jesus reminded them that God's love and grace was still available. But you know, there's another message I think the author was trying to get across to us. If you look at the Bible, you know, a lot of us don't have Bibles anymore. If we look at the scripture, we look at something on our handheld device or iPad. But if you can find a Bible that you can actually hold and turn to the 16th chapter of Mark, which is the last chapter you'll find in the book of Mark. If you go to the end of verse 8 of chapter 16, you'll find a period and then nothing. But if you have a Bible in your hand, you'll probably see some brackets where it says the shorter ending of Mark. And then there'll be some more words. And then you'll see more brackets that say the longer ending of Mark. These sections have been a point of controversy over the years. Both extra sections are believed to have been written later, after the Gospels of Matthew and Luke were written. It's believed that people wrote it because people want to know what happened. They want to know what happened after the women went to see the disciples. They want somebody to tell them what was the end. Give me an idea. Don't just leave me hanging with they went and they told no one. But earlier copies of the manuscript stop right there with verse 8, where it says, so they went out and fled the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to no one, to anybody, for they were afraid. I don't know if you've ever experienced something that seems supernatural, but it will leave you with fear and amazement. And you're left feeling afraid that people won't believe you if you try to tell about it. I remember when I was a teenager, I was sitting on the front steps at night with my boyfriend. Yes, I had one of those then at the time. And we were looking at shooting stars, looking at stars. And then suddenly there was a really bright star that was streaking across the sky like a shooting star. But this thing abruptly changed directions. Shooting stars don't do that. Planes don't do that. Helicopters don't do that. When we saw it, Paul and I looked at each other kind of out of the corner of our eye. And I don't remember which one of us said it, but somebody said, did you see that? And we never, ever spoke about it again. We didn't speak about it to each other. We didn't say a word about it. I probably haven't said anything about it until I'm telling you right now. But I didn't sleep very well for a while. So imagine seeing an empty grave with an angel sitting on the corner. I imagine that would have been terrifying. One of the commentaries I read said of the women, astonishment, trembling, fear, and silence do not seem inappropriate for Easter morning. They will find their tongues and they will witness. But early in the morning is no time to be glib and chatty about an empty tomb and a risen Lord. Still, that is a strange way to end the book of Mark. In a way, Mark is an open-ended story. Open-ended stories are written in such a way to draw the reader into the story by leaving the story uncertain. It's a genre that's intended to spark the reader's imagination. Anton Chekhov said, "The task of the writer is not to solve the problem, but to state the problem correctly." He also said the role of the artist is to ask questions, not answer them. The writer of Mark invites us to go to Galilee, which means we are to go where Jesus is, where love is. Mark told the story of Jesus's miraculous countercultural life and about his excruciatingly painful death. But he ends the book with an open tomb, which signifies that Jesus's life and work is not over. But it's an open-ended story which invites you and I to finish the work of Christ, to use our imaginations to try to right what is wrong, to try to heal and not hurt, to try to share hope and not defeat. Life does have times of loss and pain and disappointment, but the message of Mark to his audience, and by extension to us, is that even if you have to face persecution, love and hope are still alive. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." I'm glad today that the love that they tried to crucify almost 2,000 years ago is still alive in 2021. I'm hopeful because I know no matter what evil we have to fight against in this life, love still is going to win. Basil Hume said, "The great gift of Easter is hope." And Christopher Reeve said, "Once you choose hope, anything is possible." With hope on our side, we move forward to do the work Jesus would do if he were walking the earth today. As we enter into this new year in the life of God, self, and neighbor community, we will continue to do the work as we support each other, affirm each other, and do what we can do to positively impact our world. Jesus summed up that work as written in Luke 4 when he quoted from the prophet Isaiah. He said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." My friends, the story is open-ended, which means the story continues. So what verses will you add to this story of love and hope in our world? Thank you for listening.